Hello to all of our listeners, and welcome back to The Parent Solution, your one-stop shop for all things educational. I'm your host, Kimberly. Today's episode is a guest episode, and we have a former 12th grade English teacher here with us today, and she's really been making some moves in the world of alternative education. Jay, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm honored to be here with you.
I,
Definitely.
I'm excited to have you here. Maybe it's best if we start by you telling our listeners what was your experience while you were in like the public teaching system. I'm sure it was a positive one.
You're so funny.
I got a sense of
All
humor.
right. Yes, very, very much so. And I love you for that. Okay, so I was in public school education for 14 years. I did 8 years as a substitute teacher, and then I did 6 years in my own classroom. So I really got a good look at the public school system as a whole. Before I had my own kids, I said that I was going to homeschool my kids based off of those experiences from substituting and being in my own classroom. But school public where do I start? I love my students.
I
I
think
love
most
them.
teachers do.
That's what got me there every day. Was definitely the students. However, the system as a whole, it's definitely something I would frown upon. Because it's draining. It's draining for the teachers. It's draining for the students. It's draining for everyone that's in charge of the school in general. So it's just a whole process of just individuals that are not happy with where they're at, but know that they have to be there. And so, yeah, it was a lot. My last year teaching, I don't even use like terms like depression or like things of that nature. However, my students as a whole had me in a great the mental state that I was in. It was so down. Like my energy level was so down. I was dreading just everything because of course, all the things that were going on with
The last 2 years.
yes, the last 2 years.
Yeah.
All that lovely stuff was a piece of work in itself. But just the feelings of students in general, just seeing my 12th graders not being excited about graduation, seeing them being scared about graduate, going into their next chapter of life. That was real eye opening for me. It made me say, okay, well, what's going on? Like, what is totally wrong with all of this? Because even though I said before I had my kids that I would homeschool them, mine was more so on a social level, more so on I don't really want my child to have to sit in a building for 7 hours type of deal, things of that nature. But when I saw the end of the road, as far as the 12th graders being in public school for 13 years, and then they get to you, and some of them reading on third grade level, a lot of them don't know how to write complete sentences. They don't know the basics, rent versus mortgage talk, salary versus hourly rate talk. They did not know a lot. And so they were scared about entering into the world as far as, okay, what's next? What am I going into? I didn't like it. I didn't like it.
I definitely can see where you're coming from. I was actually just chatting. I chatted with a lot of people, but I was literally just talking to someone who had the same sort of idea, that we go through this sort of system and we come out, and how prepared, how prepared are those children who come out of school for life, really, right? And people can say like, oh well, it's not the school's job to prepare you for life. That's your parents' job. Okay, true, potentially. Yes, I do think that the family is one of the most important, and if not the most important, socialization tool, if you want to put it that way, and in terms of like skills and upbringing and stuff like that. It's, of course, there is responsibility on the parents too, but you can't, like you just said, children are sitting in school for 7 hours a day. Besides parents, schools are where children spend the majority of their formative years. as kids, but also like growing up as teenagers and as young adults, right? And so you can't sit there and say that school has no responsibility to teach zero life skills, right? Or to teach life skills in general, because that's the secondary, it should be, oftentimes it's the primary, but it should be the secondary institution for socialization and for teaching those sorts of skills. So yeah, kids that don't know how to do, that don't know anything about finances, that don't know how to get anything about a mortgage, that have no idea about any sort of payments, that have no idea about like cooking, right? Like we had when I grew up in school, we had home ec. We don't have that anymore, right? So the school system, I think, has really changed and altered itself. I think it didn't necessarily start out, and I know you being a former teacher, I know that you didn't start your journey as the intention of like, this is where I'm going to end up, where I'm going to be looking at these kids like, what is wrong, right? I'm sure you went into
Well,
your,
no, of course not.
yeah, you go in and you are all full of hope.
Oh yes, of course. Like I love to share I wanted to be a teacher since the fifth grade. Okay. Understand that. I had an impactful teacher in the fifth grade that set my tone like, oh my, I'm gonna go out here and I'm gonna make this difference in other people's lives because this teacher has been so amazing. Shout out Miss Crawford. I actually ended up substituting for her during my 8 years of subbing. So that was really cool. But yeah, no, I definitely had a totally different attitude as my classroom is going to be like this, and I'm going to be like this, and this is going to happen, and then no, I learned about standardized testing, and I learned about a pacing guide. I learned about just all these meetings, a bunch of meetings to tell you
Yeah.
how to operate your classroom. Um, it's so sad. It's sad because even like after you get acclimated with everything and you see, okay, this is a system, this is how this works. But me being me, and I tell people like I was a natural born bucker. So I'm just going to do my thing regardless of what you say. And my administration respected me for that. Like I've had plenty of individuals tell me they love how real I keep it or how I'm always myself because that's all I know how to be. And so even though I heard all this stuff like, oh, okay, that's the rules, that's this, that's that. My classroom was my classroom. Like that's all that's all there was to it. Like you come in here, this is my room. Like if I kept my lights off in my classroom. My quick story. My department chair, whenever he used to come and do my observations, he used to note at the end of my observation, like, and you have your lights off in your room. You may want to think about turning those on and da da da. And my little ambience in my room was my ambience. I had plenty of window sunlight coming in and all that good stuff. So it was just my vibe was my vibe, and that was my classroom, and that's what everybody knew. Department chair, administration, everyone. However, it's a lot that it's a lot of individuals that don't have that same attitude when they come into the school system. So when you're approached with all these mandates or all these standards or all these meetings that tell you, oh, your classroom needs to be like this or your classroom, for a first year teacher, that's overwhelming. And it's a lot because it just shatters all the dreams and all the thoughts you had while going through college and all this. And yeah, it shuts it all down. And so if you don't have that backbone, or if you don't have that notion of, oh, I'm still going to do this my way, then you start conforming to what all they're making you do, and you lose the love for it. Right. And that's where the damage comes in, because then you have an individual coming in who's so impactful and so important in all these lovely young individuals' lives, and they're hating where they're coming and they're hating what they're doing. And so that hate is being transferred to these beautiful students, and their love for learning is being diminished. And so that's a big issue for me. And that's why I advocate for homeschool in general, because I've seen how it looks up close and personal.
And so taking this journey, like I know for myself, I am in complete agreement. I see it all the time. Quick side note about the lights. I'm not, I don't proclaim to be an expert. I'm certainly not, a scientist or someone who necessarily knows all the statistics and et cetera, et cetera. But I do know that there have been studies done that have actually shown that the type of lighting that they use, not just in schools, but that sort of fluorescent lighting that they use is actually not helpful for mood, for learning, and for any sort of further advancement of the brain. And so
But
you might
guess what,
ask,
Kimberly?
what?
My department chair ended up sharing a classroom with me one year. He used to have
Uh-huh.
his first he had two classes in there because we had to share classrooms at time. He didn't turn on the lights. So after writing
Really?
it, all that stuff in my observations, when he got into my classroom, he kept it the same way and he did not turn on the lights.
Wow, very impressive. And this was
Yes.
after you had shared your thoughts with him about why you kept the lights
Yes.
on.
Oh, that I'm still not going to turn the lights on. Yes.
Okay, right. That's awesome. I think that's amazing. And I think that that's really what the system, like, in order to, I mean, we're talking large scale like reformation here, but in order for the system to be reformed, it has to be every single teacher that says no, like, I think that things should be done this way instead, and it doesn't matter what you say about it, this is how I'm going to do it, right? I am an optimist at heart, and I'm a little bit of a dreamer, a romantic, if you so want to call it that. So I recognize that sort of situation where we have all the teachers of like a certain, even just one province, forget like the country, even just one province or one state, or one district, really, to be on the same
Yeah.
page in terms of like what is deemed to be like the proper learning environment, and the things the things that should be taught, like the curriculum, like getting everyone on the same page is really difficult in terms of like specifics and details. I do think that there are some larger things that can very easily be figured out if we have people that are genuinely there for the kids, right? And I think for the most part, most teachers, I would argue, go into the profession and they're there for the kids, right? They are teaching because they love it. In my opinion, teaching in a public school, or even in a private school is a little bit different, but teaching in a public school, you're not going to do that unless you love children. Show me one individual who's going to sign themselves up to sit in a classroom or to be in a classroom, and like, you're not just babysitting, you're teaching, right? So like, or you're trying to,
For the
right?
most
Like, as
part.
as effectively as
For
you
the most
can,
part.
you're trying to teach, right? And oftentimes what it turns into may feel more like babysitting because you have to have classroom control and things like that, right? Or the kids don't listen, or things aren't working, or whatever. But I think that most teachers go into teaching because they love to teach, right? And they want to make a difference with kids. And they see that that's where they can really affect positive change. And so I would argue that nobody goes into teaching for the money. That's what I would say.
Well, I wouldn't say nobody, because I did have coworkers who were career switchers, and that was an eye opener for me, because that only required them having to take like a good maybe 12 credit hours of like teaching classes or whatever. Either way, it didn't matter what their background was. As far as their bachelor's went,
Mm-hmm.
they just had to take a couple hours of teaching
Right.
classes, and then they were put into the classroom. So not
Really?
everyone entered. Yeah, oh yes, and they were certified babysitters because because they let their students do whatever, and then when you got
Mm-hmm.
them to, because I taught 10th and 12th grade at one point. And
Mm-hmm.
when I got them in 10th grade, after having this teacher as a ninth grade teacher, you get in my classroom, you expect to do nothing because that's what you did in ninth grade. You didn't do
Yeah.
anything because you had that teacher. However, when you get them there, it's like, okay, now I got to combat with this because
Right.
you've learned that oh, okay, I can get past through this system without having to do anything. And
Mm-hmm.
so why should I challenge myself? So I will say
Mm-hmm.
that there are some teachers who are not necessarily there for
For
the
the right
greater
reasons.
good.
Yeah, for the right reasons. I mean, yeah, of course, you always
Yeah,
have your bad apples or your exceptions, but by and large, I think for
of
the most
course.
part,
Oh
teachers
yes, yes,
in
yes.
in
No,
public
I've
schools,
met
I
way
think,
more
are,
passionate teachers.
yeah, they're a great bunch, I think, and especially like the teachers who are coming from a little bit of the older generation too, right? They've seen so much. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about today. I know that you said
Yes.
you've taught.
My thing with teachers, like you said, that if one city, one province, one district was to come together, teachers don't know their values. their value as far as they're the ones that are making the school function. And
Mm-hmm.
so teachers to me have been the most compliant individuals ever. Like they just, okay, all this stuff gets piled onto them at all these faculty meetings, all these department meetings, all these lovely meetings, but they just keep saying, yeah, okay, I'll do it. Okay. They'll talk about it later with their teacher friends. They'll complain about it later. However, no one speaks up during those meetings and be like, nah, dog, I'm not gonna be able to do that. Like,
Yeah.
like, no, we are enough on our plate. Nah,
Yeah.
I'm good on that. Like, no one does that. And so, like you said, if teachers were to do that, and that's a challenge I would like to. Oh, I would love to challenge teachers to just all come together and be like, hey, you know what? No, we're good on this. Like, we're not going to do that. I had to tell you an instance. Because, like I said, I'm a bucker. Like, you're not just going to tell me anything and think I'm going to go along with it.
Mm-hmm.
So they wanted us to grade the standardized test, something that they had been paying a company for years before.
Right.
However, their reward to us was going to be, oh, well, you get a day off away from the kids, and like that was the kicker. Like you get away from. I said, but I like the kids. Like I don't like to be around the adults. That's my issue. Like I don't like. I don't like y'all necessarily, but I like the kids. So, yeah, no, this isn't a treat. I said, no, I'm not going to do it. And they were just so astonished, like, you're not, what? Like, my department chair was like, okay. I said, no, you need, like, if they paid someone to do this before, they need to pay us to do it now. Like, this isn't,
Yeah.
that's not, no. I'm not doing it. And so don't you know, he ended up emailing, I guess, whoever was in charge of that the testing and all that good stuff. He ended up emailing and going to bat for that. Like, hey, no, we would need to get paid for this and all this good stuff, whatever. Either way, they worked out a stipend and they ended up paying the teachers for it. I still didn't do it. I didn't go to the training for it. I didn't do it because I'm just me. But
Stick
it's
it
just
to your guns.
client teachers definitely have to use their voice more because they don't understand how much they're the value. You're the
Mm-hmm.
value to it. Yeah, that was my biggest issue with me being a teacher and just seeing yeah, like they just okay. Like, okay, I'm gonna go complain about this later, but okay.
Yeah, but okay. And like really, if you think about it, I think that's how a lot of people end up saying yes to things that they don't want to, right? They feel like they have to. I mean, speaking specifically in the teacher's experience, they feel like they have to, right? Because it is, well, it's a responsibility of the job, right? In what other job do you work like 16, 17, 18-hour days? Like you might as well own at that point, open up your own business. Like, I
Yes,
mean,
ma'am.
and that was precisely what honestly drove me to do it. Because I said, if I'm going to be working 18 hours a day, I'm going to work 18 hours for myself. I am not working 18 hours for somebody else, much less somebody who has no idea how to run a school. Like you have people in charge of education that have never once stepped foot inside a school. You have people in charge of the educational policies that have no clue about how to run schools, how to deal with children, like we're never like given anything other than a silver spoon. And there's always exceptions. There are always exceptions. I'm not generalizing
Oh,
absolutely
of course.
everybody here, but by and large, for the most part, the people who are in charge of education and systems and education policies, blah blah blah, have absolutely zero idea what actual true education, like teaching on the floor, is like. And that's why I think, like, I'm of the opinion that anybody who's doing educational policy, or who's in an educational like standpoint, like a minister of education or department of education or whatever, should have been a teacher beforehand. Period. End of story. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. But
Oh yeah,
that's
and
just
not a
my
teacher
opinion.
20 years ago either. Well, not a
Yes.
teacher 20 years ago. They need to be a current teacher. Like,
Yes.
I do agree. We used to have this lady who hosted some of the workshops at like pre-service week or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And I used to joke and say she has to be somebody's niece. Like, there's no way, there's no way she is not somebody's niece downtown, because why is she in charge of this? This is wild. But yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. And I don't think
Yeah.
people follow the money trail all the way to the lovely superintendents and the people that are actually making these decisions, that are making the six figures that the teachers
Mm-hmm.
should be making.
Yeah.
Because like you said, those that are making the six figures, they've never even been in the classroom, most of them.
Mm-hmm.
They've been in the classroom 30, 40 years ago, and they've, veteran their way to the downtown. And so it's so interesting to see how that system works as a whole. It definitely does.
Yeah, the
But
system.
know that
Go ahead.
yes, I've been writing papers since I was in middle school about how teacher salaries need to be raised. I said,
Mm-hmm.
if I started, I felt like I had been writing them long enough that there would be change by the time I got there. No, there wasn't any change. There was no
Yeah,
change.
yeah. And that's, I think, the frustrating part. But it, like, realistically, like, as much of an optimist as I want to be, that's not something that is possible at this point in history, I don't think, simply because we don't have the support that's coming from there. And I don't think that there's one right answer for everybody. I don't think that, this means that everybody should do this for education or everyone should do this for education. Like, there are children who perform very well in public school, right? And there's children who thrive in that environment, right? But the idea being here that, like, that's not necessarily suitable for everybody, and that's not necessarily the right answer for everyone. And so that's kind of why I wanted to have you on our podcast today, is to talk about what you are doing in terms of that alternative sort of education mindset.
Yes. So, like I said, my last year teaching was a bit of a downer for me. So, with that energy, I placed it into, at first, I started creating a homeschool workbook because it's like, okay, well, I'm going to homeschool my girls. Like, I committed to that. And so, after I resigned, it was like, all right, so what am I going to do? I don't know. However, I'm going to listen. So, it was placed in my heart to start working on a homeschool workbook. And then I said, okay, well, I got to get with the times because nobody wants to read and flip through a workbook. So that's how Homeschool Yo Kids app was developed, because I was like, all right, come on now, speed up. And so I created a resource for homeschoolers to access, or potential homeschoolers to access, so that they're able to understand that this isn't a journey that they have to do alone. Speaking with a lot of families after starting my own home learning journey with my girls, I just feel like as a whole, parents lack confidence in themselves as far as approaching that area of their child's education. And I'm just like, okay, well, you were there for them the first 5 years. That's been you. You were the one that taught them how to brush their teeth, how to put on their clothes, how to sit at the table and eat properly. All that stuff came from you. So it's just, you can keep going. Keep going.
Yeah.
And so the Homeschool Yo Kids app is for that. It's for that encouragement. It's for that resource. It's for that community. It's for all of that. So individuals to understand that you can do this and you don't have to do it alone.
Mm-hmm. I think on that note, like, it's crazy how, if you have a baby in a hospital or like wherever you choose to have your baby, right? Like, if you have a baby, then you're just kind of walking out of the hospital or the clinic or whatever, and they just, like, hand you this human being, and they're like, here, like, have fun, like, congratulations on the birth of your child, et cetera, et cetera. And you go on your way. Like, there's no follow-up, there's no consultation, there's no parents manual, like, there's no sitting down and talking to you about whether you're fit to be a parent or not, right? We don't have selective breeding, right? Like we do with animals. We don't have that with humans, right? But somehow we place this trust in people, like in the general society. Like, I'm going to trust you to raise your child, like the way that you feel fit. I'm going to trust you to take care of this baby. But then when it comes to school, I'm not going to trust you to, quote unquote, educate your child. What are you talking about? Like, the parent is, I would argue, like, not hating on teachers at all, but the parent is one of the, I would say, the best teachers, because that's where like I said, a lot of your formative educational years are spent in, like, with your parents and then in a school. So I don't think, like, my personal opinion on it is that I don't think that it is something that parents think that they shouldn't do. I think that it's something they think they can't do, right? For whatever reason. And I love that you've made this, I mean, digital application, or like an app that you can get that provides, like, encouragement and resources, and for people who are homeschooling, or for people, you said, who are potentially thinking of homeschooling. I think that's awesome because I think part of the biggest problem is that parents feel that they can't, right? And then they feel alone if they've decided that that's something they want to do. They feel alone and they're like, well, what's the point, right? And you're like discouraged before you've even started.
Yes, because it's not a norm. Like homeschooling isn't a norm. It isn't something that's talked about. It's now becoming something that is talked about on a regular. However, it's not something that you see around you often. And
Mm-hmm.
so you do get discouraged. And then the whole notion of teachers go to college to do this and all that good stuff. And that's why I feel like my voice comes into play because yeah, I have a master's degree and all that good stuff, but I would be the first to tell you those are pieces of paper. Like all I had to do was read
Mm-hmm.
some stuff and write some papers to be able to get that paper.
Yeah.
Like, no, that's not what teaching is about. Teaching is about feeling, teaching is about loving, teaching is about nurturing. And you have all those things as a parent because your child came through you for that reason. And so I feel like if people were to get out of the notion of, okay, school needs to look like this or school needs to look like that, then they could really understand that, oh no, teaching occurs everywhere. Teaching
Mm-hmm.
happens every day, all day. We're
Yeah.
still learning as adults.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding that there are no limits to learning or what it looks like, that is the
Yeah.
most important thing with parents.
Yeah.
And like you said, they are in the notion of I can't do this. And it's only because they have a structure or a model in their head that they think it needs to look like. But if
Mm-hmm.
they understand that they can make it fit and work for their family and what they need, then they'll understand that, oh no, you can do this. You
Yeah.
can do it and you could probably like you said, no down talking on teachers. I love all my fellow passionate teachers. However, you could probably do it better.
Yes.
And that's
And
only because of the one-on-one time that you're getting with your child or the small
mhm.
group time if you're in a co-op or however, whatever it looks like. It's just not a big classroom where the teacher is blocked. I had 157 students on my roster my last year teaching. Do you know what you do with
Wow.
157 students? Get
It's
lost.
very difficult.
like you don't Yes, especially and then like the times that we've been in where you've been talking to kids through the computer with their screens off and everything else. Like, come on, no, you have to know that you can definitely give your child more than what they've been given. Like,
Yeah.
definitely. And my argument also with the home learning approach, if you want schools to do different, you have to give them a challenge. Like schools are the way that they are. That system is set in place the way that it's set in place because there is no challenging it. There is
Hmm.
no, well, if you're not going to change make these changes, then I'm gonna just teach my child. No one's saying that. No one's
Right.
making those kind of commitments to make that stance. And that's what it's like.
Hmm.
Oh, you want to change, then you don't keep using a product that's not working for you. Your child's in the seventh grade and they're reading on the third grade level, or they're reading. I had a seventh grader reading on a kindergarten grade level. When she took her reading test, it told me to give her pre-K work. That meant that she was reading and on a level of a 3 or 4 year old. What do you do with that in the seventh grade? Like I cried so much my first year teaching and just to see like, okay, this is what I'm trying to combat. I knew my voice couldn't stay just in the classroom because it wasn't going to make that much difference in just one classroom. But now I understand the importance of my voice and saying, hey, nah, parents, y'all need to bring it home. Y'all need, y'all need to bring it home. We need to push reset. We need to do whatever we need to do. However, things have to change. Like they have to change.
Hmm. I agree. I like how you pointed out, and like I will say, we went to teachers college at different times. I just graduated teachers college in April of 2020. So like
Oh,
just when
wow.
everything was kind of getting underway, right? And things were rolling in
Yeah.
and I always like I got into teachers college and I got a slap in the face as to what it was like because teachers college, I think there was probably two or three classes that actually taught me like useful information about how to teach, right? About teaching styles and like teaching like how to talk to the kids and like different like actual practical activities
Oh,
that you
yeah.
can
Those
do with the
classes are
kids.
very limited.
Like yeah, there were two classes or maybe three, and coincidentally, two of them, and I remember that it was at least two because two of them were taught by the same professor. And he was on a mission to like change how teachers, how young teachers taught because he said there's such a problem, like you said, grade seven reading at a pre-K level. That's the thing I see all the time with pre-K literacy and things like that. And the literacy level is not where they need to be, and it's an issue. And that's a whole other conversation, like with talking about technology and how things have been made easier. But my point
But
here is that teachers college and my pieces of paper, my 3 pieces of paper that I have absolutely nothing to do with how good of a teacher I am, right? Like it did not teach me anything about the actual practical skill of teaching. Now, that's my personal opinion. That was my personal experience. So other people may have a different opinion. But in my personal experience, the teachers college and university and other additional qualifications, zero about how to act, like actual practical application of how to teach. Where I learned how to teach as a teacher was in my co-op. And like God bless my co-op, my co-op placements and my co-op teachers. I was really lucky. Not everybody that I talked to was the same way, but I was really lucky. I had good teachers, passionate teachers, teachers that wanted to like make a difference. And we're still teaching and had that same sort of mindset 15 to 20 years into teaching. But those teachers, I think, are few and far between, not through their own fault, but I think a lot of teachers get into it with all this hope, right? And then they become very disillusioned because they're like, wait, this is not what I signed up for, right? This is not what I signed
yeah,
up for.
yeah, that is, I used to joke that I would be talking first year teachers off the edge because I had a lot of first year teachers break down on me, like, crying and stuff, and like don't know what they're gonna do or how to manage their classroom or what to do like you said, those classes don't prepare you for the real deal. They don't
No.
prepare you for students, 25 to 30 students being in your face, expecting you to be in control of the situation. And you're not, because you're scared or you're nervous or you're exuding some kind of energy that they know they can take advantage of, and they will. And so
Yeah.
I always said that I feel like teachers should, especially new teachers, they should go through a process of substituting. My comfortability in the classroom, I feel like, is a lot accredited to my 8 years I spent subbing. Like, I went all over the school building. I went from elementary to high school. I was in middle school most of my time. But either way, me going and having that experience, my first year of teaching in my own classroom, oh, of course, I was comfortable as can be because I had been there. But that's the thing, the hands-on experience is needed, because you can read as many textbooks as you want. That doesn't do anything. Like,
Yeah.
these are just scenarios. And then you got to look at when those books were written. These kids
Yeah.
are different.
Yeah.
They're different from when I first started subbing. Like, so they're different.
Yeah. They deal with many different challenges, I think.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
speaking of like looking at the curriculum books, like for this is something else to consider for people who are considering homeschooling or potentially considering some sort of unschooling or micropod or whatever. If you look at the curriculum books, like for public education, look at the dates on them. Like they have not been updated for some of them for 20 years. Some of them are like older than me. And
Yes.
I just
Yes,
like
ma'am.
I'm not so ancient, but like some of them are like the 80s, like the late 80s or the early 80s, and I'm like, this has been around since before I was born. And it's just crazy to me that there's this idea of like we don't need to update the material that is taught to our children. Forget about what they're actually learning and retaining, right? But the material itself that we're teaching and the standards for what we are teaching has not been updated, and we don't see that as a problem. Like if that is not a giant red flag to you, I don't really know what else to say. Like to me, if something's not been updated for 20 years, I'm not going to go and buy a house that's maybe a house a little bit different, but I'm not going to go buy a house that clearly has not been with updated plumbing and updated electrical wiring and whatever without getting a full sort of report on the situation first to make sure that everything is okay. So if we look at a house that way when we're buying a house, why don't you look at education the same way? Right? In terms of this needs to be updated, this is out of date now.
But there's a separation. And this is what I noticed with being in the classroom. Parents are separated from their children's education once they get into the school system. It's like okay, you're gonna learn that there, and that's all there is to it. There's
Mm-hmm.
not what are you learning and why are you learning that necessarily, because parents aren't even under, no. Think about an average conversation that parents have with their student when they come home. Like, oh, how was school today? Fine. And then
And
like
that's it.
that's it. That's
Yep.
they go on about their way. What did you learn today? Nothing.
Oh, I say
Or
that one all
maybe
the
one
time.
thing. Oh yes, of course. So it's a disconnect, and that's why I like my app also, because I even added a question in there, a frequently asked question, which is, do I need to be a full homeschool parent to be able to use this app? And it's like, no, because parents really have to understand the important role that they play in their children's education, regardless of what school they go to, regardless of if it's traditional or not, or whatever the case may be. We have to bridge that gap in between parents and school. It's somewhere. Because even if your child is in a traditional setting, you have to understand that, yes, a traditional setting may lack something, but you're going to have to pick up that ball if you're going to keep your child in that system. So knowing that your child is being taught this or this and that, and they're not being fulfilled in this area or that area, then you have to pick up that ball. However, like you said, with a child being in the building for 7 hours out the day, you're not thinking about, okay, what I have to make up for you after you spent 7 hours in a building. Like, because we only have about 3 to 4 hours with each other before you're going to bed, and bam, then our next day is starting.
Right.
Yeah.
And in those 3 to 4 hours, you have to worry about, supper and a shower or a bath or whatever, right? There's things to look after. Is their homework done, right? That might be the only sort of academic thing that you get to do with them is their homework, right? If that, right? If your child's a little bit older, they might just head up to their room, right? Fine, nothing, right? I can't count how many times, a kid comes on with me and hey, how was your day at school? And oh, it was fine. It was fine. What did you learn today? Nothing. Like that is a very common refrain. And so I started responding with,
and that should be alarming. That should be concerning. Like, hey,
and so I respond to that. 7 hours? And so I respond to that, and I'm like, okay, well then we'd better learn something today, don't you think? And they're like, oh yeah, like right, like kids get, and that's the thing when you have adults, and I mean this is a little bit of another conversation, but when you have adults like you as the parent, as well as other positive role models of learning in your child's life, that really makes a huge difference because they see other adults that are excited to learn. They see other adults that are living a life of like a constant learning journey, right? And when you see that from another adult other than your mom or your dad, it's very helpful to be able to encourage yourself to keep learning, right? Kids being excited to learn is, I think, one of the biggest things that I love about what I do. And that's why I love the idea of this app so much, because you're quite literally connecting people and connecting parents with the resources that they need, whether that be people or like workbooks, if they want to do workbooks or activities or like things like that, right? You're connecting people with those resources so that they have the supplies, but so that they also don't feel alone, because it's like a community that you've got.
Yes, ma'am. And that's the key to it all, Kimberly. Like the aspect of loving to learn. Like that's why, like, it always alarmed me when kids made it to me in 12th grade the way that they did, because it's like, okay, you lost your love for learning back in 3rd grade, or you lost your learning back in 5th grade, because that's what level they're on. So you understand like where they stop processing or where they stop tuning in to what was the information that was being given to them. And it's like, oh, well, why did you lose that? Like, how did we lose you that early? And I don't want to blame standardized testing, but I mean,
I'm sure
standardized testing, like they would have lost me if that was
yeah. Well, this is the thing, is that there's multiple different factors, but I feel like I feel like this is the truth, but I know this to be a fact, that if you as a parent take an active role in your child's education, regardless of whether it is keeping them in the system because you don't really have a choice, right? Like depending on what your job situation is or your work situation is, keeping your child in the system may not be something that you want to do, but it may be something that you have to do for right now or for the indeterminable future. Okay, so how can you work within the system to be able to combat some of that, some of those struggles that they might be facing, right? Of not getting enough attention in the classroom, of feeling like they're disengaged from their learning, of not being able to properly complete what it is that they are trying to complete or to do in school, right? And that opens up a conversation about expectations and whatnot. I don't think that learning should be a whole lot of expectations, but unfortunately in the public school system you don't really have that option. Learning is that you are expected to retain information and to memorize information, not really to learn it, right? So
yeah. Yeah, no. And that's why I said the disconnect that parents have, like once you're in school and then I'm checked out. I feel
Hmm.
like that is that's changing over. I do feel like there's a great awakening happening as far as when 2020 happened and everybody was at home and able to see their child's what they were learning on the computer, what what the teacher was
Hmm.
actually teaching, and parents were a lot more active with their children. So that didn't go away. Like parents
Yeah.
still remember that, even if they
Yeah.
did send their children back to traditional school, they still know, oh, okay, well, a lot of this stuff they don't really need, and a lot more that they could be doing as far as this goes.
Yeah.
So I think parents need to like just think about the freedom that homeschooling in general affords the family as a whole, because
Hmm.
your whole life is tied up in the public school system if people don't realize it or not. Like you set your schedule, you set your vacations based on the public school system. You your day is dictated by the public school system, as far as oh, we got to get up at this time because you got to be in school at this time, and then you get out
Hmm.
at this time, so I have to be off at work, or I have to arrange for a babysitter, or whatever the case may be. Everything is set up in that structure as far as the school system goes, of
Hmm.
how your day is going to look when your child enters into public school
Interested
or
into school.
any kind of school, really. But just
Hmm.
yeah, it dictates your life. It really does.
Yeah.
And this has been
And
like my freest year ever.
and well, this is the thing is that if you think about like how it dictates, like it doesn't just dictate your life when you are in it, right? It also dictates your life once you get out of it because like it is, and I've said this many times, it is not something that is designed to produce creativity, and it's not something that is designed to encourage individuality, right? School is a training ground for later in life. It's a training ground for what you're expected to do later in life, right? And I think you're right. A lot of
Oh
people
yeah.
in 2020 kind of woke up to that and were like, wait a second, this is not really what I want for myself, and it's not really what I want for my children. And I know that there are many parents who have made the switch to say, okay, well, we're going to change our lifestyle a little bit. We're gonna, this is gonna have to get cut back a little bit. We're gonna change up the schedules. We're gonna do this. We'll try this. And what I love is that a lot of parents have actually seen that giving their child the choice. I have parents who have given their child the choice. Do you want to go back to school this year, or do you want to do homeschooling or some sort of alternative education? And most of the kids have said, I want to stay home. I want to do homeschooling. I want to do alternative education. I want to do some sort of academic education, in house, right? And that involves the parents a whole lot more, and they're a lot more engaged. If the parent is engaged with the child's learning, then it's very hard. I would say it's much more difficult for the child to not be engaged, right? Because mom is right there, right? Dad is right there. You have an adult encouraging you, right? And if you're getting outside help, whether it's tutoring or some sort of other academic performance to be able to keep things on an academic keel, just to make sure your kids graduate or on the same sort of academic level as other people. That's a huge concern with a lot of parents. Well, if I homeschool my kids, then they're not going to be as smart, right? Or they're not going to have as many opportunities. Like it all depends on the way you go about it. If you have the proper resources and if you have the proper network and you have the proper support, your kids will come out on top, actually, rather than underneath, like you
Yeah.
think. And I think that's a really common misconception that I have seen, anyways, in dealing with a lot of parents who are making the switch to homeschooling or who are thinking about it. So I think that's a really important thing to mention for sure.
Yeah, no, that's a I think because the whole socialization thing always comes up, and that baffled, like, just all the negative connotations associated with homeschooling in general baffled me now, because I wasn't aware of them before I got immersed into the community. But now
Mm-hmm.
that I'm reading different blogs and reading different like information about it or commentary about it, it's just like, what? Like, no, first of all. Like,
Yeah.
my girls, I tell people this story because first you got to understand that although I was a teacher and all that good stuff, like this journey to do different and to do something that is not the norm, it does take a lot of work within yourself. as a whole. So your child wanting to stay at home with you all day is a big deal. Like that means something to me. That means something great. There are a lot of kids, like you said, that you can ask and they'd be like, nah, I'd rather go to school. And if that's the case, then like, there's some concern there, because the socialization that people are feeling like school offers, or feeling like, oh, my child needs to go to public school to be able to socialize with, like, no, because in all actuality, they're given a 30-minute lunch. They have maybe a PE class if they have PE. And then the rest of the time is in classroom, where it's definitely not a lot of socialization taking place. It's more on okay, y'all need to do your work, or you need to do this, or like the teacher is facilitating whatever they're facilitating, but it's not socialization.
Yeah.
So that's always a weird thing for me.
Yeah.
My girls, when we first started this, because we had moved from Virginia to Arizona, and so I had a lot, and I was still decompressing from my last school year and everything. So when I got here, my headspace was not where I needed it to be, but I was making and taking the proper steps. I was doing meditation, I was doing yoga. I was just ensuring that I was doing a lot of self-care. But there were days definitely that I would threaten my girls with public school. Like, I'm going to send y'all to public school. And they were like, no, no. And it's just funny because that's, the reverse of, oh, no, I'm going to teach you myself. If you don't know how to act in school, then I'm going to teach. No, I'm going to send y'all to public school if y'all don't get y'all act together.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I love this journey. My girls love this journey. They look forward to it. They look forward to our days. Our days are all different. It's a flow of just what feels good for us, and how we start and how we do it as a whole. It's our way. And I love how we mesh like that. And that's what families like. It's about you finding your groove. You find your groove and what works for your family. Hey, you can prosper, believe me, because like you said, creativity and identity is not something that's promoted in public school. It really isn't. I feel like it's drained out of you by the time you make it to high school. And then by the time you get to high school, you're just going with what the popular opinion is, what the majority are saying. My students I tell them all the time. First of all, I used to tell them that they were the smartest, dumbest generation, because they had so many questions that they could just look up on their smartphone, but instead they would ask me, and it's just like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to Google this, something you could do. However, let me show you. Because why are we here still? And y'all are like walking around with mini computers in your hand all day. It's weird. But they're dependent on others to give them their opinion. And that's what bothered me about the public school system. It makes it's like a herd mentality. It's definitely like okay, well, this person said this, so I'm gonna say that too. Like, no, honey, what's your opinion? How do you feel about something? I got to the point where I stopped modeling on the board. Like, I wouldn't model essays anymore, because literally I would read essays that all started like whatever model I put on the board. Like, no, we're not doing this. Like, this is not this. Like, come on, babies, y'all have to. You are too intelligent. You have so much inside of you, and it just really needs to be brought out. And it hurts me that that's what we get, like, that they were getting to me that way, because it's like, what happened along your road that made you think that you didn't have a purpose? What made you think that you didn't have a reason for being here? Like, it was just, oh my goodness, like, it's a lot. It really is a lot.
But it's true. I think that a lot of kids, like, by the time, like I said, by the time they get to grade 12, they really are just like done. They're just done, and they don't really have that enthusiasm, like the enthusiasm that some of my, like, I mean, my kids are a little bit different. When I work with my students, they're a little bit different. Like, they are, the 7-year-old that I'm teaching has a very different attitude from like the 15-year-old that I'm teaching. Right? Where did that desire for learning go? Right? And I mean, like I said, they're a little bit different because I approach learning a whole lot differently than the public education system does. But seeing that difference, even with like positive models there, to me, that means it's all the more important to make the right choices with schooling, right? I mean, you can present anything as a learning experience, really, or anything within the realm of appropriateness to as a learning experience, but giving your child the freedom to be able to choose something that they actually want to learn about, I think is a large part of homeschooling that parents kind of overlook, right? Like they're like, oh, what am I going to teach them? What do you mean? What are you going to teach them? Like they need the
What is
basics of
the
reading, writing, and math, but whatever else they want to learn about, they want to learn. Like we used to have home ec in school. We used to have, tech class and wood shop class and things like that. Like they were electives, right? That you could take for things that you were
Mm-hmm.
interested in, right? And what's to stop you as a parent from doing that at home? Nothing,
Yeah. Oh, no,
right?
oh yeah, no, nothing. Is there's no limits. There really are no limits to this learning journey that we're
Mm-hmm.
all on. It just takes a different mindset. It really just takes you getting out of the, oh, this is what school needs to look like. This is what education is. This is how you do it. Like you have to get out of that mindset and reach your child where they're at and then take them to where they need to be. Because we're not all here to go to college. We're not all here to go into the world of work. Like is that's not what we're purposed for. And so
Mm-hmm.
you have to find that drive, that passion that they have inside of them and meet them where they're at because we all have it. Like everyone always tell you to go back to your childhood mentality where wonder is everything because you feel like anything is possible. My
Mm-hmm.
girls believe that anything is possible. My 8-year-old said she's moving to LA when she turns 10. I said, so you feel like I said you feel like you're gonna know everything you need to know by 10? And she's like, yeah, like but the fearlessness that my girls have, and that's really just mindset, is beautiful and it's igniting, it's inspiring, and it's just something that I never want to see drained out of them because I always want them to feel that anything is possible. You can do anything that you do. And I love that they have that in them. And that's why it hurts me to see certain kids and just their interaction with life in general, even at a younger age than, like you said, the 15-year-old and the 7-year-old. They're taking in so much from this world without explanation. No one's explaining all these YouTube videos or TikTok videos or all this stuff that they're getting boggled with every day. They're just taking it all in and then they get this picture of the world and that's what
Mm-hmm.
they live in. Like, oh,
Yeah.
this is dreary, this is sad, this is I know life is beautiful. Life is beautiful. You have definitely plenty of experiences that are also not friendly. However, your life is beautiful because you're here for a reason. Like
Mm-hmm.
your purpose is far greater than anything you experience. And if you tap into that as opposed to all that outside noise, oh, you'll be great. But I feel like definitely in the in the school setting, there is a lot of outside noise, a bunch of outside
Mm-hmm.
noise. I tell people, and my 12th graders taught me more about drugs than I knew myself, like about a lot of things. Like they were teaching me about acid, they were teaching me about things that I was like, oh my gosh. But it was their
That's
experiences.
that's the life that they've been exposed to, and so that's
Yes,
all they really
ma'am. Yes,
know.
ma'am. Oh my gosh. It's just so eye-opening. So eye-opening. But I know my life path has been shaped all the way up to this moment as it has been so that my voice can be so profound in this. Because I love teachers. I love teaching. I love learning. I love all that good stuff. However, when I recognize a system that is not doing us any good, I'm going to speak on it. And I've been speaking on it since I was immersed in it. So my voice is going to continue to be as it is because no, change has to come. Now we got to save our babies because this is what it's all about. Like we can't
Mm-hmm.
leave them with this. Like no, they're worth way more than that. I know my girls are worth way more than that. I don't know how other people feel about their kids, but they should feel
Yeah.
like no. Right. And so that's the purpose of that app. That's the purpose of Homeschool Yo Kids. And the yo is on purpose and intentional because I was an English teacher, so I definitely understand proper grammar and all that great stuff.
Yes.
However, homeschooling is that informal. Get out of
Right.
that standardized thinking, that traditional way of learning or traditional way of, oh, this is what school or learning needs to look like. No, homeschool your kids. Like
Yeah.
figure it out, do your
Do
thing.
your thing. I
So
love it. I love it. That's creative. I was kind of wondering. I was like, oh, like that's like I mean, it's the name of an app, so perhaps it's like some sort of slang, but it's good to know that there's a certain meaning behind it. And I think that's really
oh
appropriate.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I've had people look at it and be like, oh, this is so like the app is so formal, like, like how it's set up and stuff. And they're like, you sure you want to have that title? And I'm like, yeah. Like, do you know me?
It catches people's attention for sure. And I mean,
Yeah.
I've looked through it. I think it's fantastic. I think it's amazing, with all the things that you put together. And I'm really looking forward to seeing it grow, to the point where I'm sure you're taking it because something tells me you're not done with it yet.
Oh yeah, I'm not done with a lot. I'm actually in the process of planning a expo, like a little traveling expo that I look to
Exciting.
take on next year. Very exciting, very, very, very exciting. Because I do want to change the narrative associated with homeschool. I also want to change the
Mhm.
face that's associated with homeschool because it seems like it's just a religious, white, like Christian thing to do. And no, homeschool is far beyond that. So it's just like, yeah, no, everyone can homeschool. Like you don't have to be a part of this group or that group or
Mhm.
have to look like that. No, you can do it. You can do it.
Yeah.
Doesn't take a degree. It does not take a piece of paper for you to teach your own kids. It doesn't.
I love it. Thank you, Jay, so much for being here. Thank you for all your insights, and your expertise, and thank you for showing up the way that you are, like for all of the energy that you brought to this podcast. It's much appreciated. It's refreshing.
Thank you. I appreciate you and your humor, your funny self. I love it. I love it. Keep doing what you're doing because you're doing amazing things. So I appreciate you.
Thank you.
If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to reach out. You can always find me on social media. It's Star Students on Facebook and LinkedIn or starstudents.learning on Instagram. You can also reach out through email, which is all over social media channels. Thank you, as always, so much for listening, and I'll be back next week.